Hello, Little Woman fans, and welcome to the Little Woman podcast. I am Niina, your host, and today's comment shout out goes to Stella Luna 33, who says, quote, "Don't tell McMarch, I mean Mrs. Brooke, but when I found fresh currants at the farmer's market last month, I thought I would make a fruit compote with them, and then ended up making currant jam by mistake. So, I don't know what your problem was, Meg. It seemed easy enough to me. Ducks down to avoid the saucepan being thrown at my head." End quote. This is so relatable. I go wild when I see berries, especially red currants. Have you come across red currants when the light hits them? They look just like red jewels, and I want to paint everything. I want to eat everything. I want to make jam and juice and wine, and I want to bake something. Same applies to cherries and strawberries, raspberries, and blackcurrants. Also, here in Finland, you can get blueberries for free in the woods, which is the best. You need to cover yourself from the mosquitoes, but other than that, I love to pick blueberries. Also, if you go more north, you can find cloudberries. Back in the days, my aunt, she used to serve cloudberries with vanilla ice cream. That was the best. Let's move away from food to today's topic. Emily and I continue our chat about the chapter Vanity Fair. This time we delve into Meg's experience at the ball and her inner conflicts that rise when she's interacting with all these rich and glamorous people at the party. If you are a fan of this podcast, you can join my free newsletter at littlewomanpodcast.substack.com and you can get notified when new episodes appear. This is the Little Woman podcast, Meg goes to Vanity Fair, dress up games, and inner conflicts. Enjoy!
And I think the section where Meg is kind of like, oh, well, I saw things in a certain way, and all of a sudden, like, these people's, ultimately meaningless perceptions come in and kind of ruin how you see a certain a situation, and you just kind of repeat those particular phrases to yourself. It's deeply relatable. She's just like, oh, my family is, we have certain things are a certain way in our family, and we have this friendship, and now other people's just points of view they're projecting on us, and it's just kind of ruined everything, and I can see that.
It would be a nightmare for me to live in this kind of community where your actions are always sort of part of town gossip. I was thinking about this part where Meg heard this gossip about her mother, and I don't get this sense that she has known Annie and these Moffats for, I don't know how good friends they are. They are friends, but they're not actual friends.
Yeah, or it could be a situation where she's friends with the girls. Yeah, maybe superficially, but she's never really had to interact with the family on a very intimate basis. Yeah, I mean, it's implied that Mr. Moffat has known their family for a bit, has known their father for a bit, and it kind of like a family friend situation where you're friends because you kind of know each other and you are the same age, and your parents have chatted, but then you haven't really got to know each other's value systems. And of course, she's getting to the age where you start to pay attention to adult value systems, and she's probably never had to really think about those before. And I've noticed this with my family's interactions with friends that I've known my entire life. Like, maybe my relationship with their kids is good, but then I start to also observe the parents. And sometimes, just because you're friends with the kids doesn't mean you know the parents very well. But then you kind of get to a point where what the parents do actually matters. So I think it's that kind of situation.
When she hears this gossip, I get this feeling that she has been trusting to these people and they betray her trust, even though she's not that very familiar with them. But it's almost like childish trust that you have for other people that we all have at some point. That is broken after this.
Yeah, you have a sense that she's like, oh, they've taken care of me. They're so nice and they've taken care of me. And I think Mrs. Moffat is described as this very plump and, kind person. And then, of course, I think it's even like a shock for us to hear her talking about her Marmee this way, in this kind of not malicious, but frankly quite insulting way.
Yeah.
And I think the voice of the novel and also Meg, I think they're being quite charitable with describing them as being nice. Maybe they are. I don't know if Joe would really see it the same way.
Where were we?
We were at Mrs. Moffat lumbering in like an elephant in silken lace. I love that description.
I'm going out to get some little matters for my girls. Can I do anything for you, young ladies? Asked Mrs. Moffat, lumbering in like an elephant in silk and lace. No, thank you, ma'am, replied Sally. I've got my new pink silk for Thursday, and I don't want a thing. Nor I, began Meg, but stopped, because it occurred to her that she did want several things and could not have them. What shall you wear? Asked Sally. My old white one again, if I can mend it fit to be seen. It got sadly torn last night, said Meg, trying to speak quite easily, but feeling very uncomfortable. Why don't you send home for another? Said Sally, who was not an observing young lady. I haven't got any other. It caused Meg an effort to say that, but Sally did not see it, and exclaimed in amiable surprise. Only that? How funny! She did not finish her speech, for Belle shook her head at her and broke in, saying kindly, Not at all. Where is the use of having a lot of dresses when she isn't out? There is no need of sending home, Daisy, even if you had a dozen, for I've got a sweet blue silk laid away which I've outgrown, and you shall wear it to please me, won't you, dear? You are very kind, but I don't mind my old dress if you don't. It does well enough for a little girl like me, said Meg. Now do let me please myself by dressing you up in style. I admire to do it, and you'd be a regular little beauty with a touch here and there. I shan't let anyone see you till you are done, and then we'll burst upon them like Cinderella and her godmother going to the ball, said Belle in her persuasive tone. Meg couldn't refuse the offer so kindly made, for a desire to see if she would be a little beauty, after touching up, caused her to accept and forget all her former uncomfortable feelings towards the Moffats. On the Thursday evening, Belle shut herself up with her maid, and between them they turned Meg into a fine lady. They crimpled and curled her hair, they polished her neck and arms with some fragrant powder, touched her lips with Caroline salve to make them redder, and Hortense would have added a soup cone of rouge, if Meg had not rebelled. They laced her into a sky-blue dress, which was so tight she could hardly breathe, and so low in the neck that modest Meg blushed at herself in the mirror. A set of silver filigree was added, bracelets, necklace, brooch, and even earrings, for Hortense tied them on with a bit of pink silk, which did not show, a cluster of tea-rose buds at the bosom, and a rouge reconciled Meg to the display of her pretty white shoulders, and a pair of high-heeled blue silk boots satisfied the last wish of her heart. A laced handkerchief, a plummy fan, and a bouquet in a silver holder finished her off, and Miss Bell surveyed her with the satisfaction of a little girl with a newly dressed doll. Mademoiselle is charmante, c'est jolie, is she not? Cried Hortense, clasping her hands in an affected rapture. Come and show yourself, said Miss Bell, leading the way to the room where the others were waiting. As Meg went rustling after, with her long skirts trailing, her earrings tinkling, her curls waving, and her heart beating, she felt as if her fun had really begun at last, for the mirror had plainly told her that she was a little beauty. Her friends repeated the pleasing phrase enthusiastically, and for several minutes she stood like the jackdaw in the table, enjoying her borrowed plumes, while the rest chattered like a party of magpies.
Yeah. I mean, I must say, I know that we're not supposed to really love that Meg is made up. This is not supposed to be the constant state of affairs. But I do like this description of this scene. Like I said before, but it's like you can just see the outfit.
When I have read this chapter, to me this has always been about Meg feeling very conflicted about things, because on one hand, she sees that this is all like a big show. Like it's not really, how would I say it? It's almost like people showing off themselves, trying to be more important than they are. But then there's a part of her that likes it, the attention that she gets.
She likes the other people praising her, and she really does enjoy it. And I mean, it just kind of makes me think of when you go to birthday parties and they kind of do up your hair and in different ways, and you just really want to see how it would look. And I mean, later on she's ashamed of it, but frankly I'm just kind of like, I don't know, just try it out, as just to see it. I think it's a good experience for her. Frankly, she's not used to, say, showing off her shoulders, which was the fashion at the time, because you were almost expected to in these evening gowns in the 1860s. And she kind of has to do these little things, like, put these flowers on to just be like, okay, I don't feel as self-conscious about that. The book has I think has its own value judgment on this whole on this scene. This fable, like the jackdaw in the fable, which I just looked up, and it's this bird that I think is vain, has found some feathers from a peacock. And it's like a jackdaw that dresses himself up in some peacock feathers, and then of course then the peacocks are like, well, what are you doing? You're not one of us, even if you put on the feathers. And which is just a very interesting parallel to this situation with Meg, who wants to fit in with these very glamorous looking rich people. So it feels a little bit damning, almost unnecessarily.
The narrator says that even Belle herself sees Meg as a doll, that she can dress up and play dress-up games with her. And they're not really her friends. They're not her enemies, but they are not her friends because they objectify her. They sort of belittle her. They kind of make mock of the fact that she doesn't have money and that she only has one dress. They kind of make fun of that. Laurie is her friend, and they sort of joke that he's her suitor.
Yeah.
Anyone who would feel conflicted by that, because I think she's much more relaxed and much more herself when her sisters are dressing her up for the ball. But when she's dressed up by Belle Gardner, it's mentioned that she feels quite uncomfortable by that at times. Is this okay to be dressed up by this person? Is this okay if I think that I look pretty?
Yeah, because I think this book has several scenes of people dressing other people, right? Whenever the sisters dress each other, they're always kind of looking out for each other's best assets, right? I think they're always they always have this sense of like, okay, maybe this isn't super flashy, but it has good taste, good on you this way. And there's not really a sense of that thoughtfulness when Belle dresses Meg, right? I would say Belle is the most tactful one of all of the other girls here, right? Because you have Sally, who's just like, oh, why don't you just like send her another dress? And it's just and Belle is the one who's just like, be quiet, and you in this very subtle moment. and then finds a way to really convince Meg to put on the dress is just like, yeah, I just can't, I've just outgrown it, and it just would, really be good for me if you did this. It would just make me really happy. She's really good at persuading Meg, and she knows just how to smooth things over in what little we know of Belle. But of course, we can see that discomfort that you talked about, where the dress is too tight. It is very tight, and we know that if her sisters were dressing her, they would have made those kinds of considerations. And it's very much people doing these things to her and not really being like, oh, well, Meg has these features that we should really accentuate. Meg has this kind of natural beauty that we should emphasize. We've talked so much about, we've read so many chapters with people preparing each other and dressing each other, and that's an interesting contrast.
A lot of this really reminds me of Emma and Harriet from Jane Austen's Emma.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Actually, yes.
Emma, she's a very complicated character, but her biggest flaw might be that she wants to sort of highlight her own importance by being charitable. And I feel like the Moffats and the Gardners are quite in the same space.
Yeah, that's why I'm less willing to be like, oh, they're being kind, they meant well, because I mean, I feel like they're just being like, oh, we are just so nice to give our things to this person who is so poor and clearly is really hard done on. We'll just feel really good about ourselves, and we'll have played with this person. And like, because Meg is clearly for their pleasure. They don't actually really care about her as a person.
Yes, and a very good scene in the 1994 film, because you can really see that she feels quite uncomfortable in the way they are dressing her up. I love that scene. I think it's my favorite scene in the 1994 film.
Yeah, no, it's a very good scene.
Better with the opera smooching, but that's a whole nother level. But like my favorite Meg scene, maybe of all adaptations, I love that. The way they interact in that scene, it's so true to the book. I love it.
I mean, this chapter is actually quite long, and there's a lot of very, very subtle interaction here, and they kind of really put it into one scene, one very small scene. What really stands out to me, especially in the early chapters, is like how much fairy tale reference there is into other stories. A Cinderella and her godmother going to the ball, the jackdaw from the fable. The fable of the jackdaw, that reference is just very much a sense of, yeah, Meg's trying to fit in with these people who are never going to actually accept her. And it's very silly.
If the Marches, they used to be, more well off, Louisa grew up very poor. She grew up in poverty, and it took a very, very long time for her to even make decent amount of money to herself. This kind of thing would be very exotic for her.
Yeah. No, I mean, just it's kind of like going into another world, and in the sense, it's kind of like Meg's experience of being able to go into another world for a time. And I don't know that it's even really an escape for her. It just kind of looks really nice, but then has all these aspects to it that do make her quite uncomfortable and do trouble her quite a bit. I mean, it makes sense, she based on her own education, but her own desires and envies, that she would have a lot of complicated feelings around this experience. I will say though that, like, I would love to have a knight in a really nice dress like that. It does sound like a really nice dress and a nice outfit.
Yes. I would in general like to go to a ball of like in the 19th century.
I think Jane Austen Festival does reenactments. I think here and there are balls that you can go to in historical recreations. I think, those sorts of things exist. Like, I know like some Victorian cosplayers and costumers. I think I see these things on Instagram a lot.
Oh,
so
nice.
I think they do exist. I'm sure it's not cheap though.
Probably not.
Yeah, because then you'd have to kind of either make or buy the outfit, and then you'd have to actually, go. So, but yeah, no, it does exist though.
Nice.
While I dress, do you drill her, Nan, in the management of her skirt and those French heels, or she will trip herself. Take your silver butterfly and catch up that long curl on the left side of her head, Clara, and don't any of you disturb the charming work of my hands, said Belle, as she hurried away, looking well pleased with her success. You don't look a bit like yourself, but you are very nice. I'm nowhere beside you, for Belle has heaps of taste, and you're quite French, I assure you. Let your flowers hang, so don't be so careful of them, and be sure you don't trip, returned Sally, trying not to care that Meg was prettier than herself. Keeping that warning carefully in mind, Margaret got safely downstairs and sailed into the drawing rooms where the Moffats and a few early guests were assembled. She very soon discovered that there is a charm about fine clothes which attracts a certain class of people and secures their respect. Several young ladies who had taken no notice of her before were very affectionate all of a sudden. Several young gentlemen who had only stared at her at the other party now not only stared but asked to be introduced and said all manner of foolish but agreeable things to her. And several old ladies who sat on the sofas and criticized the rest of the party inquired who she was with an air of interest. She heard Mrs. Moffat reply to one of them, "Daisy March. Father a colonel in the army, one of our first families, but reverses of fortune, intimate friends of the Lawrences. Sweet creature, I assure you. My Ned is quite wild about her." "Dear me," said the old lady, putting up her glass for another observation of Meg, who tried to look as if she had not heard and been rather shocked at Mrs. Moffat's fibs. The queer feeling did not pass away, but she imagined herself acting the new part of fine lady and so got on pretty well. Though the tight dress gave her a side ache, the train kept getting under her feet, and she was in constant fear lest her earrings should fly off and get lost or broken. She was flirting her fan and laughing at feeble jokes of a young gentleman who tried to be witty, and when she suddenly stopped laughing and looked confused, for just opposite she saw Laurie. He was staring at her with undisguised surprise and disapproval also, she thought, for though he bowed and smiled, yet something in his honest eyes made her blush and wish she had her old dress on. To complete her confusion, she saw Belle nudge Annie, and both glanced from her to Laurie, who, she was happy to see, looked unusually boyish and shy. Silly creatures, to put such thoughts into my head. I won't care for it, or let it change me a bit, thought Meg, and rustled across the room to shake hands with her friend. Yeah, no, I think we kind of follow along with from Belle feeling pleased with her success, showing off her own taste. And then I thought it was interesting, this turn of phrase, "You're quite French."
Yeah, I was thinking about
again, this French taste showing up, or reference to French fashion and taste coming up in this story. I feel like it made me think of how a lot of things just kind of stay the same, because I don't know if you remember that there was all a rage in sort of a blogging world where everyone wanted to be Parisian at some point and dress like French girls and eat like French girls, dress and eat and live like French girls. I don't know if you kind of caught some of that. People are still aspiring to be like the French. It's interesting. And also, like Mrs. Moffat doesn't even refer to her by her own name, which is just wild. And just telling her businesses, and also her father is not a colonel even. He's a chaplain, if from what I understand, in the army. Doesn't even really engage much in combat, what we understand. So
kind of made up a story of her background.
Yeah, of her first families, but reverses of fortune. Oh my God. I wanted to kind of talk a bit about this particular passage of people reacting to her, because I think it's an interesting gendered response to her, I feel like, which I find very interesting, because it seems that a lot of men had already taken interest in her, right? But then the women also seem to have not really paid attention to her before, but then now pay attention to her because of her clothing. And it seems like it is a very slight difference in how the men versus the women react to her her costume change, which makes me think that the men already liked her, but thought that they were just kind of still conscious enough of class that they thought maybe not, but now they just want, they're like, oh, well, she looks like more like the sort of person that we're expected to interact with. And now then they talk to her. And then also with the women, they just kind of seem to have dismissed her outright because of her clothing, and now they pay attention to her again, which makes me think a lot about the reasons that we even dress well in the first place, because half the time I think we're not even dressing to attract partners, we're attracting to just impress other people, our peers. I thought that was an interesting detail. And it's interesting, Sally is just is like, oh, Meg's prettier than me. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was funny. But of course, in the novel, we're not, making these people feel envious is not supposed to be the goal necessarily. And we know that.
Yes. I mean, Meg is always described to be the most prettiest of the March sisters, but then you never really think that, oh, these rich girls would envy her because she's pretty.
When they pay attention to her when she has, like, her original clothing on, they're like, oh, well, she's, this cute, pretty, but poor person. But then you put a dress on her, they're like, oh my God, I wish I was this person, which I think is, Marmee would kind of consider that value judgment very superficial.
The queer feeling did not pass away, but she imagined herself acting the new part of a fine lady. I think this is something that would alarm Marmee as well.
Yeah. She does continue to do a lot of that for the rest of the evening, even after interacting with Laurie. I mean, she's kind of cosplaying a little bit, as a different person. I like that she wants to kind of fancy herself playing a different character, but she's also constantly uncomfortable, right? I mean, the dress is hurting her. She's tripping over her dress. She's and she has these earrings, which I want to understand how they've attached them to her ears, because they say they've attached them with silk, which I kind of want to understand how that works. No, because so they've attached them with silk, and which implies that they don't have like holes to go through her earlobes. That's just a detail. And then laughing at the feeble jokes of a person who tried to be witty. Like, yeah, I think it's an interesting character moment. I love that in 94 they put in this detail where she's just like, I've been tripping on this dress the whole night. It's terrible. And then she has this makeup that she tries to wipe off herself.
I don't know how they really related to makeup in the 19th century during this time. In some religious context, it was not seen as a very proper thing.
Yeah.
I remember there's this moment in the 1994 film when Meg is like, she's sitting in a corner and she's wiping off her lipstick.
Yeah.
Rouge.
Yeah. I think around this time, at least over in the UK, you were either a prostitute or in the theater if you had a lot of obvious makeup on. I mean, it didn't mean that you didn't wear makeup. Everyone still did wear makeup. It just was very, very understated because there was such an emphasis on the natural beauty of the person. And as someone writing in this time, I think, and I feel like the transcendentalists, maybe not so toxic, I don't know, they would probably think that the natural beauty of the person should be what is emphasized, right? And so we can I feel like we can see a hint of that with Marmee being like, oh, well, a young girl should have flowers rather than pearls. I know the Victorians in general believed in no makeup, and we can see that she kind of resists the soupçon of rouge. We can see earlier in the chapter.
She had something going on between Ned Moffat, but it was very one-sided, if I remember correctly.
Ned Moffat. I barely even remember Ned Moffat. Yeah, I don't feel like it features very much for her. It doesn't even really register for her. Yeah. I like that these guys are like making themselves stupid in front of her. Louisa doesn't like any of these people.
Awkward flirting.
I mean, it's just kind of like people at parties just trying to like just act smart towards you. And of course she just is like playing this role and just kind of pretending to find all of this stuff really, really funny. I thought that was funny. All right. Shall we move into Meg and Laurie's interaction?
Yes, when I find it. I'm glad you came, for I was afraid you wouldn't, she said with her most grown-up air. Jo wanted me to come and tell her how you looked, so I did, answered Laurie without turning his eyes upon her, though he half smiled at her maternal tone. What shall you tell her? Asked Meg, full of curiosity to know his opinion of her, yet feeling ill at ease with him for the first time. I shall say I didn't know you, for you look so grown up and unlike yourself. I am afraid of you, he said, fumbling at his glove button. How absurd of you! The girls dressed me up for fun, and I rather like it. Wouldn't Jo stare if she saw me, said Meg, bent on making him say whether he thought her improved or not. Yes, I think she would, returned Laurie gravely. Don't you like me so? Asked Meg. No, I don't, was the blunt reply. Why not? In an anxious tone. He glanced at her frizzled head, bare shoulders, and fantastically trimmed dress, with an expression that abashed her more than his answer, which had not a particle of his usual politeness about it. I don't like fuss and feathers. That was altogether too much from a lad younger than herself, and Meg walked away, saying petulantly, You are the rudest boy I ever saw. Feeling very much ruffled, she went and stood at a quiet window to cool her cheeks, for the tight dress gave her an uncomfortable brilliant color. As she stood there, Major Lincoln passed by, and a minute later she heard him saying to his mother, They are making a fool of that little girl. I wanted to see her, but they have spoiled her entirely. She is nothing but a doll tonight. Oh dear, sighed Meg. I wish I'd been sensible and worn my own things. Then I should not have disgusted other people or felt so uncomfortable and ashamed myself. She leaned her forehead on the cool pan and stood half hidden by the curtains, never minding that her favorite waltz had begun, till someone touched her, and turning she saw Laurie looking penitent as he said, with his very best bow and his hand out, Please forgive my rudeness and come and dance with me. I am afraid it will be too disagreeable to you, said Meg, trying to look offended and failing entirely. Not a bit of it. I am dying to do it. Come, I'll be good. I don't like your gown, but I think you are just splendid. And he waved his hands as if words failed to express his admiration. Meg smiled and relented and whispered, as they stood waiting to catch the time. Take care my skirt don't trip you up. It is the plague of my life, and I was a goose to wear it. Pin it around your neck, then it will be useful, said Laurie, looking down at the little blue boots, which he evidently approved of. Away they went fleetly and gracefully, for having practised at home, they were well matched, and the blithe young couple were a pleasant sight to see, as they trotted merrily round and round, feeling more friendly than ever after their small tiff.
We can see that people who kind of appreciated her sort of inner authenticity, they just didn't really like her being dressed up and trying to be a person that she's not. Even if she gets a lot of attention on the whole, I mean, she kind of knows in herself that she's not being herself. And then the people who care about her the most won't like it.
Yes.
But it's interesting that Laurie is not unused to wealth. I mean, he probably interacts with people like the Moffats all the time. But what he appreciates about the March family is that they're not like that. And it's probably a bit jarring for him for one of them to just suddenly to look so different.
One of the things about Laurie, which is sort of a contention in the fandom, his obsession with the March family, because he wants to be part of the family, then he marries Amy and all that. But then there are these moments when he doesn't really understand the privilege that he has, because around the time when Laurie is in his early 20s, 19, when he's in college, there are these moments when he buys, nice gloves to himself, and then Jo is sort of saying, oh, you spent your money on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yes.
He's described to be very vain. I don't think that's the right word. He was 19th century metrosexual, Because Laurie is a young man who likes to take care of himself. He likes to have nice looking clothes. He likes men's fashion, and he has, perfumes. I don't know, men's skincare products from the 19th century.
Yeah.
This really frustrates me. People really judged Meg because of this chapter. Some people say that she's very vain and all of that. It's not true. But then nobody complains about Laurie being a 19th century metrosexual.
Yeah, no, because I think Laurie doesn't behave very much differently from her in later chapters, right? Later on, Amy, I think, would really love this experience. I think Amy would love getting dressed up. I think Amy would have the gown, but then want to trim it in her own way and just like style herself in her own way, I think. And I think she would just not really care what people thought. Yeah, I can see her kind of consenting to the experience, but maybe dealing with it a bit differently. I kind of understand what Laurie is thinking at this point in time, and that, there's just like, oh, it's just spoiling these people that I like and I know. On the other hand, I think it's a bit unnecessary for him to just say, oh, I don't like your outfit like that. It's true that he doesn't quite understand the nuances of why Meg would want a night like this, and why she would want to try out wearing an outfit like this. No, I think he really needed an Amy to kind of smooth out these rough edges of him. They're good friends, but I feel like Laurie is not good to Meg in a lot of this book.
I think he's a little unfair to her in this chapter.
Yeah. I think in general he's not good to her. I think she also needed a bit of the wake up to the fact that this is not a world where she belongs, right? So I can kind of see it a little both ways. Laurie was not good to her, and I think continues to not be very good to her in other chapters. But I think Meg does need this experience to understand who she is and what she values, and who her friends really are.
Yes.
Yeah, and they even adapted this little bit of dialogue. Pin it around your neck.
Yes, I remember that.
Your neck. In 94. Well, he likes her shoes. That's nice. I think when I was younger, I read that she had these blue boots, and I was very confused because I didn't know how typically Victorian shoes would look. So I was just like, why is she wearing boots with a nice with a gown? Because I didn't realize people don't wear like high heels the way they look now. They were nice shoes, but they were still boots. And they would have been laced with, I don't know, ribbon or something like that. Can't help thinking about how Amy would deal with this experience later on. We've talked about Amy, right? But because Amy has always had this sense of taste, but I think she would have dressed Meg very differently in this situation.
I think she would have kept Meg very beautiful, but more modest.
Yeah.
Giving her a dress that fits.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Of course. The sisters always prioritize each other's beauty and comfort.
We talked about the chapter Cause, where Amy dresses up Jo and with a shawl and makes her very presentable. If Amy would be living in today's world, she could be like a fashion designer.
Yeah. I think we already know Amy is very artistic and has a very good sense of aesthetics, and when she dresses herself, she never really experiences Meg's sense of self-consciousness about herself, right? I think Amy, as far as I can remember, yes, she envies wealth and nice things, but when she gets to dress herself, she's just like, okay, this is what I've got to work with, and I will get this outfit to the point where I feel okay in it. I remember when she dresses herself when she's like in Europe and she has to go to different events, she's just like, well, ideally I would choose this fabric, but that was too expensive, so I trimmed it this way and this way, and now this feels good. I mean, I really respected Amy reading those chapters because she knows how to work with what she's given. She never really even compares herself that much. Now, mind you, she's with Aunt March at that point. As far as I can remember, I mean, she never experiences this sort of like, oh, I wish I had, these other things like you guys. Not quite in the same way as Meg.
what you said about Meg having a money complex, I think that might be one of those reasons. We know that Amy wants to marry a rich man, but I don't think she really has that kind of money complex because she really works around things. I don't remember the chapter, but I think she was trying to paint something and then she ran out of paper or something, and then she just tried to figure out how to make things better with some other materials that she had. Took another angle to things. So that's really nice about Amy.
I think she's very resourceful. Mind you, she's had some time to grow up because, I mean, we still have a Limes incident to go through. We still have the book burning stuff. And she's a very interesting character. And I think when she kind of gets the idea like, okay, I need to rely on what I have and I'm going to make the best of the situation. And once she kind of gets that idea, then she's ready to go. I admire that.
It's a really good feature to have.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that Meg is a bit of a people pleaser. But I think the problem with Meg at this point is that she has hard time to say no.
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of people have that. I have had that.
Same.
Especially if you are being sort of almost pressured or being manipulated by other people, then you just say yes to things because you want to please them. Yeah. I think that's one of her struggles that she tries to overcome.
Thank you so much for listening. Emily and I continue our discussion next time. Take care and make good choices. Bye.